Good morning. My name is Rob Teresi. I'm a professor at Penn State University. And, and I approached my friends and colleagues at Penn and said, let's do a weekly series called Coffee with Rob. And what we'll do during this weekly series, we'll talk about tips for parents and things that we can do to try and help your children be safe, happy, and healthy, as well as you as a parent. So the first one in our Coffee with Rob series is going to be about parenting rules. I give a lot of presentations, and parents quite often ask me at these presentations, Dr. Teresi, if there's one thing that I could do that would really make a difference in my home to make my kids safer with regard to alcohol and other drugs, what would you recommend? You know, we're busy, we have lots of things going on. So what's the one thing that we should do more than anything? And we say, well, you know, that's a really good question. There's a lot of things that you could do, but one thing that's putting a lot of pressure on me to give you the one tip that would make a difference. So I'll think for a moment, and then I'll say, okay, well, you know, we know communication is really important. We know monitoring is really important, knowing where your kids are and who they're with. Modeling good behavior, we know that's important too. We know these things are important. But if I was going to recommend one thing, it would be probably not letting your kids have alcohol, access to alcohol, until they're older. And the law in the United States, throughout the whole 50 states, is 21. And so people will say, well, why 21? What is it about the 21-year-old drinking age that makes it such a special time? In reality, we have data that shows that a few things that make this sort of a special time. The first and perhaps the most important is that we have really good data from multiple sources that shows one thing. It shows that the earlier that kids start to have that first drink, the more likely they are to have alcohol-associated problems later in life. And the longer they delay initiation and onset of drinking alcohol, the less likely they're going to have alcohol-related problems in life. So it may not be like a 15, 16, 17-year-old saying, oh, can I have a sip of your wine or a glass of the champagne? I'm not going to become an alcoholic from one drink. And the reality is they're probably not going to become an alcoholic from that one drink. However, the data show that when kids drink because their parents allow them to, oftentimes they'll drink more frequently later on and heavier when they do. And they'll combine it with other drugs. So the big three: more frequently, more heavier, and combining it with other drugs. So we know that children that start drinking at early ages, like 14, 15, 16, are much more likely to have alcohol-related problems in their life than individuals that start at later ages, so 20, 19, 21, things like that. And there's a lot of good data about the maturity of a brain, and I may spend some time later on in one of my Coffee with Rob talks talking about that. But for now, just suffice it to say, early is not necessarily better. In fact, the opposite. So what parents say, so what should I do? What should the rule be? And I say, well, because I feel that if I allow my kid to have a little bit of alcohol, it'll take the mystery away. And if I let them have a drink on occasion, they may be more honest with me about drinking later on when they're outside with their friends. So I find that parents oftentimes are trying to do something positive for their children by allowing them to have an experience with them or with their families on special occasions or holidays or things along those lines. So they're trying to be protective. And if I were to say to them, I don't think it's a good idea, they probably counter back to me, and I've heard this, where they'll say, well, in my home, I know my kid, and I know it's safe, and I know they're not going to be like that. So oftentimes we look at the data, the Monitoring the Future data, which is a really good resource, and it looks at 7th graders on through after they graduate from high school. And the data show it goes up, drinking goes up at different times. And our goal as health scientists and clinical people are to really try to disrupt that increase in drinking at different times. So oftentimes I ask parents, well, what are you concerned about as far as alcohol in your kids later in high school or when they leave your home? And they always say things like, I don't want them to get out of control. I don't want them to get hurt. I don't want them, definitely don't want them to get in the car and drive. And I don't want to get in the car with somebody else who's been drinking or using other drugs too. And so, well, what do you do to try and prevent that? They say, well, we talk to them all the time. And I say, good job, do that. They say, well, we try and keep an eye on what they've been doing and what they haven't. So we monitor them. And I go, excellent, keep that up. And then they say, well, we model also, we don't drink a lot in our home, so we model it too. And I say, you're doing 3 things that are really well. What else are you doing? They say, well, that's about it. I say, well, there is one thing you could potentially do that the data show really have an impact, and that is, and I say this only because you care about your kids and you obviously doing some good things. I said, you can maybe pump the brakes on letting them have alcohol, because we've seen in our data, as well as other studies here in Europe, Australia, and other places in the United States, where the earlier the kids drink, oftentimes it's not as protective as we think it would be. In fact, it's the opposite. Instead of being protective, it actually, again, they're more likely to drink outside the home more frequently, heavier when they do, and then combine alcohol with other drugs such as marijuana, nicotine, stimulants, other depressants. And we know that there's problems with that. So one thing you could consider is maybe not being as willing when that happens. And that comes up. You try and have more resistance and share with them the new data that we have that it's not protective. In fact, it causes increased risk. So that's the tip of the week with Coffee with Rob. I'll see you next week when we talk about celebrations right around graduation. Thank you.